Welcome, everybody. My name is Allie W. I'm here from Yarn Inspirations. So happy to be here for an amazing class, the 3-hour throw. So for those of you who don't know how to knit or crochet, or are just looking to get this super trendy blanket, this is the perfect pattern. If you have any questions throughout today's class, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. I will pass things over to you, Tamara.
All right, thanks so much, Allie. Hi, I'm Tamara from Moogly, and I'm really excited to share this 3-hour throw with you. Now, it will take you 3 hours once you get the hang of this technique. If you've never crocheted and you've never hand crocheted before, you're probably not going to whip up a blanket in the next 3 hours tonight, but we'll teach you the basics and you can go back over the video recording and go step by step. I will show you all of it tonight that you need to know. It is a pretty simple technique, but again, if you haven't crocheted before, it is a whole new skill. So I do want you to feel free to take your time with it, practice the techniques like any other thing that you might learn, and then you'll be able to make a really beautiful blanket. So we have right here the original. You can see right here, it worked up in about 3 hours, but I had been practicing beforehand. So this is hand crochet. You can see the yarn is quite large compared to my hand size. Here you can see we are using a very thick yarn for this, specifically Bernat Blanket Big, Bernat Blanket Big. There we go. I'll be showing you a little bit more about this yarn in a moment, but it is a very thick yarn, and that's what allows us to do this with just our hands. Otherwise, we would need, a smaller crochet hook to do it. So if you do not have this yarn today, or you don't have a thick yarn, you can try and hold several strands of yarn together if that works, or you can just watch along with the class and practice later. So let's go ahead and go over to the hand camera here. I'm going to swing it in and we'll take a closer look at this yarn together. There we go. Let me set this blanket off to the side because it is quite warm. There we go. All right. So this is Bernat Blanket Big, and this is a really thick yarn, which I mentioned. And we know that if you're new to yarn, we want to look for this yarn symbol 7. That means it's the thickest type of yarn out there. It's a jumbo yarn. You can see just how thick it is compared to my hands. That, again, that's what's going to make it easy for us to use our hands for this technique. So if you've got your yarn, and hopefully your hands, we can go ahead and pull that label right on off. And then you just want to take the time to find the end of the yarn. I got really lucky. Mine's just hanging out right here. So I can pull that on up, and I'll pull up a few yards to work with here. Now, if you've crocheted or knitted before, you might be tempted to try and look for the end that's on the inside of the ball. I'm going to recommend you just go ahead and pull this one from the outside. It's going to be a whole lot easier to find, especially as we get started here on our class. So I'll give everybody just a moment to find the end of their yarn. Allie, were there any questions that I could answer or address right up front, maybe about the yarn or the technique? Excuse me.
I have a question here about whether or not you could substitute a different chunky yarn for this pattern.
As long as you get stitches that you like making with your fingers, then absolutely. You might, if it's not the same thickness, you might not want to use as many fingers. You might, make your stitches a little bit smaller with your fingers, or a little bit bigger if it's even thicker than this one. But you can definitely use other yarns. It's just once they get too small, it's just going to be really hard to get in there with your fingers. So you might want to try and hold a couple of them together if they're, for instance, only a 5 or a 6 weight. And this one right here is a 7. So for this pattern, we use for the whole pattern, we make the whole thing, the whole blanket. Tonight I'll just be using one skein. And to practice, you only need one skein of it. But if you want to make the blanket as written, we would need 4 skeins total. And this is the written pattern that has been linked in the chat and will be linked, along with the video as well. So it's very simple. For if you do crochet, we chain 17, skip the chain closest to the hook, single crochet in each chain, make single crochet rows for about 18 rows. And the finished blanket with 4 balls of yarn is approximately 36 inches by 36 inches square. So again, you should have the copy of that pattern, and it is linked in the chat here. So what we're going to do first and foremost is start by making a slip knot. So you can see here we have our great big yarn. And I know I'm pulled back pretty far from it, but these are going to be some big stitches. We need a little bit of space to see it. We're going to come in, here's the end. We want to come in about 12 inches or so. This is a big yarn, so we need to leave some big ends. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to fold this over like so. So that it looks a little bit like an awareness ribbon. Now this end of the yarn over here is still attached to my skein. Here's our tail end. I haven't cut anything. And we've just folded the yarn right over like that. Let me show that one more time. We just fold the tail end of the yarn over like so. There we go. Camera did not want to keep its focus here for some reason. Let me see if I can get that to focus in just a little bit better for us today. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm just going to make sure. Oop, that's probably a little close, but we'll work with it. All right. Hopefully that will stay a little better in focus there. So we've got our little fold over there. What we want to do now is pull that tail end behind the loop that we made. Like so. So it looks a little bit kind of like a little pretzel or something right now, but it's just that fold over with the loop, the tail end behind the loop. Then we want to reach into that loop and grab that little piece of yarn that we can see inside the loop there and pull up on that while pulling down on the other two ends. So we're just going to grab that one. So you can see I've got my ends here and that little bit in the middle there. There we go. And we pull up on that and it makes our slip knot. Sorry about the camera, guys. I'm not sure why it keeps going in and out of focus there. Let's do that again. Now, the great thing about a slip knot, I think probably the reason it's called a slip knot, when we pull on the ends, it goes away. So we can do it again. So we find the end of our yarn. We come in 12 inches or so, fold that yarn over so it looks like that. Just a little loop there. Then we pull that tail end right under that loop. And grab that little bit in the middle and pull up on it while pulling down on the strand attached to the skein and the tail end right there. Now, you want that final loop to be just about big enough for 2 or 3 fingers. For these, I like to do 3 right here. So this is why a lot of the measurements for this blanket and projects that you'll see in hand crochet are kind of estimates. So I say the finished one will be approximately 36 by 36 inches. It's because everybody's hands and fingers are a different size. So unlike when you're working with a crochet hook, you've got a standard hook setting the size for all your loops. Here we're using our fingers. Now the knot, we're only making 1 knot for this project, and it should be relatively tight, just tight enough here to hold the loop together. But the loop itself should be big enough to get about 3 fingers in. And you can adjust that just by pulling up or down on that loop. If you want it tighter, you pull on the ends, pull it too tight, and the whole thing comes out. So we'll do that one more time before we start chaining. We've got the end of our yarn. We come in about 12 inches, fold over our loop, pull that end under the loop, reach in right there to that center part and pull down until the knot is tight and the loop itself can fit about 3 fingers. Now the 3 fingers should be, it shouldn't be painful to get your fingers in there. They should be comfortable, have maybe just a little bit of wiggle, but you'll get a feel for this as you go. And again, everybody's hands are different size and people have different preferences. You might like your stitches a little bit tighter. You might want to make your loop a little bit tighter. For now, just try and keep it really kind of comfortable right on those fingers. Once you've got that loop and your slip knot, this loop right here is what we call the active loop. We're going to push that active loop a little further back on our fingers, and then we're going to take the end of the yarn attached to our skein, not the tail end that's hanging out right here. We'll take care of that when we're all done with our project. For now, we want to take the end attached to the skein and we want to yarn up and over our fingers from behind like that. So let me do that again. I've got that loop on my hand. I've pushed it back a little bit to give myself some room here. Then I'm going to take the yarn and yarn over my fingers. That's what we call a yarn over in crochet. We don't want to come up from underneath. We do want to come from behind, up and over our fingers like so. It may not seem important. It might seem like a little thing, but it will keep your stitches a lot straighter as you continue on through your project. Now, so we've got our active loop and we've got our yarn over. So what we're going to do is use our thumb, or you can curl your fingers, whatever is comfortable for you. We want to reach into that loop with the slip knot and grab this one and pull it right on up and through. Now, this is our active loop. And here we've made our first chain. So this is chaining in crochet. We've made a slip knot, and then we make more chains by pulling that loop to the size of 3 fingers again, yarn up and over our fingers, grab that loop, and pull it through the active loop. We'll be making lots more of these. Here's our new active loop. And now we can see we have 2 chains. We look from the side here, we can see there was the first one there and the second one there. This is from the side or from the front. This is what those look like from the top. Let me pull my fingers out here. I've got nice and close view. You can see there's our first chain, how it kind of makes a V. And here's our second chain. It's a V that sort of nests into that first V. So you can count each of those V's as 1 chain, 1 stitch, 1 and 2. That's what we've made so far. The active loop does not count as a stitch. We don't count that active loop that we're actually working with. We just count the ones that are already finished. So this is what they look like from the top. If we flip them over, this is a little bit harder to see. You can see the 2 loops that we saw from the top are on the sides, and there's a third loop here, the back hump or the underneath hump, that sort of goes right in a line underneath. Those would just continue on up as we make more chains. So let's go ahead and make a few more chains. I'm going to flip this back over. We want to insert our hand again from the front, from the top. We want, when we pull on the yarn that's attached to the skein, we want that to be the part of the loop that's in front of our hands right here. Okay, that way we know that this loop has not gotten twisted. So we can just readjust the fit for that loop. If it feels really loose, if you've pulled it up and you've pulled it up too big, just give it, gently pull back down on it until it's about 3 fingers or so again. Then we can push that one back, yarn up and over. Remember, we're going to come from behind over the top of our fingers. Then we can reach in and grab that loop and gently just pull it right on up and through. Yarn over, reach through, and pull that loop through. Adjust the size of your loop on your fingers. Get it good and comfy there. Yarn over, reach through and grab that bit of yarn and pull it up and through. And you'll just keep making chains. You can see all those little V's are now nested one right into the other. And that is what they look like from behind. So if we were to count our chains that we've made so far, we get that all the way up there. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is my active loop, so it doesn't count. Let's make a few more. Get our loop back on our fingers. You can push it back to the back as far as you need to feel comfortable. Pull down on that yarn so that it's not too loose on those fingers. And the yarn up and over with the yarn. Reach through and grab that loop and pull it up and through. Now, again, this is called chaining in crochet. And this is the first step in learning to crochet once you've made the slip knot, whether you're working with your hands or with a hook. And either way, I recommend that your first night, you really just concentrate on the chaining. It's sort of the basis of all the other stitches making this particular move. And it takes practice. It just plain takes practice. I crocheted with a hook for probably close to 20 years before I tried doing it with just my hands. And it still took me some practice to get my loops nice and even and consistent. So again, it's not, something that you'll necessarily pick up overnight. Some people do. Some people have a real knack for it. But I know I certainly didn't. And it can take some practice. So just like I would tell someone if they were learning to crochet, with a hook, go ahead and just practice your chains, miles and miles of chains until you feel really comfortable. Let's go ahead and start again, because this really is the most fundamental part. Now, just like I showed you on the slip knot, we can pull on both those ends and the slip knot just goes away. We can do the same thing with our crochet stitches. So whether we just want to start over again to practice, or we made a stitch that we don't like, one turned out too big or floppy or too small, we just pull on that yarn end attached to our skein and our stitches come right back out. So for this particular pattern, we start with a chain of 17. I'm probably not going to make that many tonight to demo with. Well, I probably will total, but on our little demo piece, I won't make that many. But the great thing about this sort of project is you really can make it as many chains as you want to determine the width of the project. And then you can make as many rows as you want to determine the length. So I've pulled out all my stitches. I am now back down to the slip knot. So I put that slip knot, that active loop above the slip knot there on my fingers. You can see there's just enough room to wiggle. And I make my first chain the way I make all the rest of my chains. We yarn over and pull that loop through. Pull it up till it's about the height of 3 fingers. If it's too big, you can pull back down on it. Push that loop back out of the way, yarn over, grab the yarn, and pull up and through. Push that loop back, yarn over, grab that yarn loop, and pull up and through. Push that loop back, yarn over, pull up and through. Now, the slip knot loop became our very first chain down here. So now it counts as a chain, but it didn't while it was our active loop. When it was on our hands, it didn't count. It wasn't until it's worked off our hands and that stitch is complete that it is counted. So right now, this is our active loop. This does not count as one of our chains. So in our little swatch right here, our little sample so far, we have 1, 2, 3. Oh, this one got a little wonky. 1, 2, 3, 4 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I did see a question pop up real quick. If you didn't want to do this with your hands, what hook size should you use? And luckily I happen to have it handy. It is a 25 millimeter, also known as a US 50. However, I will say if you are new to crochet, ignore the US 50 part. The part that's really important that you want to look for is the 25 millimeter. That's what you want to hone in on. But you can see just how big that hook is. So that's what we're kind of trying to imitate with our hands. And you can make smaller stitches, I will say, with your hook than you can with your fingers, or at least smaller than I can make with my fingers. But, you know, like I say, hand sizes differ. All right, so let's make just a couple more chains, and then we'll see if we have any questions on that, and then we can work on adding some height to our fabric, because right now we're making the width of our blanket, but we need to start making some height. Right now we've got a beautiful ribbon going. So we've got our loop to continue chaining, however many chains you want to make. Just yarn over, remember, bring that yarn up and over our hand, grab that loop, and gently pull it up and through. You'll see I'm not twisting the loop as I pull it through. I'm just yarning over and gently pulling up and through in that same direction. So that is the chaining portion. Allie, are there any questions I can answer up to this point before we move on?
You answered one of the questions about, does the slip knot count in your chain?
Yep. It does now because it's finished. Well, the slip knot itself doesn't, but that first loop after, once you've worked it off into a chain, does.
Perfect. And then there is a question here on if you can maybe show the slip knot again.
Yes, let me, actually, you know what? I'm going to use a slightly different yarn, also available at your local Michael's, to do that, simply because I don't have another skein of the big handy. So let me show, this is Bernat Plush Big, as I say, also available at Michael's, also a fantastic yarn. And this one might be a little bit easier to see for the slip knot here. Let me find my end. Still going to come in about 12 inches. Bring that loop right over there so it looks like an awareness ribbon. Here's that tail end of the yarn right there. This end is attached to my skein. We've just created that little loop right there. Then we want to pull that tail end under the loop, just like that. And then you see that little section of yarn right there in the center of that loop, right underneath it. We just want to grab that and pull up on that one and pull and kind of secure those two ends. And that will become our slip knot right there. And then we can just adjust the size of that slip knot. You can see, in this one, it's a little easier to see as I pull down on the tail end there, that loop moves within the slip knot itself. So we only make one slip knot, but then we start making the chains. So we yarn over and pull that loop through in order to make those chains. So there's just one slip knot, and that what was the active loop from the slip knot became our very first chain right there. So let me pull back up our Bernat Blanket Big here. So again, counting our chains, usually the easiest way, depending, some people like to do it different ways. People like to look from the top and look for each of those little V's. So you could say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You could look at it from the side. You can kind of see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Or we can go from underneath. We talked about how there's that sort of lump underneath, but that can be a little bit harder to see. So usually people count the V's on top, or you count here sort of from the side. And I think I might have seen another question flash by. I'm sorry, I didn't catch it though.
Let me see. How many slip knots across, or how many chains across would you want the blanket for a full size or queen size blanket?
Ooh, well, that is a great question. And we will be going over some of the math to figure that out at the end of the class. I've got some papers all set to go for that. So sorry, but you're going to have to wait just a little bit longer for that one. I will go over it though.
Perfect. How do you keep it from being loose in some parts and tight in other parts?
That is the practice I was talking about. That is genuinely, that's the hard part. That's 100%. Figuring out, of course, how to make the move, but then getting the loops even and consistent is the hardest part. That is the part that you want to practice. It genuinely, I wish I had my best advice for it is just to kind of get a feel for how that loop feels on your fingers, and then make sure it feels that way every time that you yarn over and pull through. But that practice will give you that consistency in the size of your loops. You end up with the same thing, whether you're doing it by hand or with a crochet hook, genuinely. Either way, chaining. I always say make miles and miles of chains, and that's what's going to give you the consistency in your loop sizes. I wish there was a shortcut. If there was, I'd be making $1 million, but unfortunately, practice is the best way to learn that skill. So after that first slip knot, if you want to make the 36-inch blanket, approximately, again, everybody's hands are the different size, you'll want to make 17 total chains. Again, that does not count that last active loop that you still have on your fingers. To make other sizes, we'll get into that as we go. If you don't need to know a specific size, you can just keep making chains until you've got the width of the blanket you want. So the chaining, it's the same, whether it's the first one or the 17th or the 31st or the 101st. This could be the slip knot right here and the loop from the slip knot. It's the, 10th or 11th chain in the row right now. Regardless, there's a loop. We yarn over and we pull that loop through to make another chain. Now there's a new chain and there's my active loop right there. So if it's twisting, that can be a factor of if you're twisting those loops as you pull them up and through. That can be part of it for sure. If you've put it down, it's possible if you picked it up and put your hand back in, the wrong direction, that may have twisted the loop. And again, practice on keeping those loops nice and even is really the biggest thing. it's just the only way to get those loops nice and even every time. So now I'm gonna make just a couple more. Mine got a little floppy there at the end with all the playing around and demoing. So I'm gonna make a couple fresh ones here. And I don't have 17. That's okay. I'm just making a few here to demo with tonight. We're gonna pretend that we just want a tiny little blanket, just a little swatch. So now I've got that active loop on my hand. Now this loop right here that's on my hand right now, I'm going to need to make one more chain, but this loop I'm going to turn into what we call the turning chain. The turning chain acts like a little ladder. And what that ladder does is what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working back into these chains to start building up our fabric. We want a little ladder to lift us up to the height of the row that we're going to be making. Otherwise, the start of our row can be a little pinched because we're just leaping right into our row. We'd want to take that little step. We want to step up to that next level so that our row is nice and straight across the top. So for the turning chain, and this is something that's unique to hand crochet, not something you would do with crochet with a hook. We want to make this turning chain just a little bit smaller. I find when I'm hand crocheting, these turning chains can be a little loosey-goosey along the sides, and we just want to make them a little bit tighter. So for this one, I'm going to have you take out one of those fingers, shrink it just a little bit, shrink it down to a 2-finger loop. Might take a minute, it's fuzzy yarn. There we go. So now I've got just a 2-finger loop. Again, this is specific to hand crochet, not something I would, obviously be telling you to do. I wouldn't have you switching your hook size or anything like that with a hook. But for hand crochet, I like to make these turning chains just a little bit shorter than I normally would make my stitches with my fingers. Now, so then I've got the right size loop, so I need to yarn over and pull through. And now this shorter little chain right here, this one I just made, is going to be my turning chain. So since it's my ladder, I'm not going to work back into it. It's doing its job lifting me up. I'm going to work back into the other chains that we've made. So when we chain 17 total, this would have been our 17th one. So we're only going to have 16 chains to work back into because that 17th one is going to get skipped. That's that turning chain. So now we want to work back into our stitches to make what we call single crochets. Working into the chain is something that is probably beyond just getting the hang of use making the stitches. Working into the chain can be very tricky because if you're new to crochet, you aren't used to looking at the different parts of the stitch to say, aha, this is the same loop every time. So again, as you're learning and practicing, if you can find a little loop from each stitch that it feels good for you to work into, then that's the loop you should work into. You do want it to be pretty consistent. You want to try and work into the same loop of each chain as you work across your chain. Okay, so whether that's this loop right here, whether that's going under maybe both of those loops of the V, or even flipping it over and working into the back hump, wherever you want to work into that chain is fine. You want to keep it consistent. Now, if you're just beginning, you're probably going to twist it at some point. Don't worry about it. You're just learning. And I already showed you, if you don't like your stitches, all we need to do is pull on that yarn to pull it right back out, and those stitches all go away. Now, I did see one question popping up. They wanted to see one thing again. I'm not sure exactly what part you were referring to. So if you could clarify that a little bit, I'd appreciate it. Or maybe Allie, did you see it? I might have missed it.
I think it might just be going into this first row. So
okay. All righty. Well, we'll definitely be showing that here. All righty. So the turn is just making a smaller chain. We just made one more chain, but we put our fingers down to just 2. Here, we'll do one more. I'll just work into a slightly smaller chain there. Let's see. There we go. This yarn does have a lot of fuzz to it, so it can be a little harder to just pull through. You can take your time with it. For the turning chain, we just want to make a regular chain, but it's a little bit smaller. So it would be the 17th chain. For this blanket, the turning chain is the 17th chain. All right. So That's our turning chain right there. That's the one we want to skip. Let's go to the next chain. And I'm going to pick this loop right here because it sits up really nice and easy to see. It's kind of that top portion of each chain right there. It stands up really nice and easy. So let's use those tonight. Again, you can really work into any part that you want. You just kind of want to make it the same as you go, but that's a skill that comes in time. So we've got the active loop on the hand. Here's our turning chain. We're going to skip that one. Go on to the next one. So here's the first chain that we want to work into. I've got my fingers in my loop. Now I'm going to go away from me under that loop of the chain. Just like that. I'm going to put my fingers right under there as well. Now, if this is a little too tight and you can't get three fingers through at this point, you can go ahead and pull one out and just use two. We want to keep our loop a 3-finger size here. We can just go right under that loop of the chain. So now we've got the active loop. We've got the portion of that chain. We've gone right through the chain there. So then we grab our working yarn again, make a little bit of room. We're going to yarn over again. We still want to bring that yarn up and over our fingers. And then you can kind of use the end of your fingers to grab it, get your thumb in there if you like to, whatever's most comfortable for you. We pull that yarn up through the chain. And don't worry, I'll be showing that many more times here. Now, once we pull that loop up and through, let's get that third finger back in there. We want these loops to be the same size. This is our active loop, and this is the loop that we pulled up through the chain. So we want these to be the same size. So we push those both out of the way. Yarn over again. And now I like to take and just kind of grab. It's gotten really natural for me all the times I've done hand crochet to just grab that yarn over between these two fingers. But again, you can get your thumb in there, whatever works for you. We just want to pull that loop through both of those loops. And there is our first single crochet. You can see from the top, we've got that same V, just like we had with our chains, and that's the top of our stitch. I will definitely be repeating that, do not worry. Excuse me. So, and just like all our other stitches, if we don't like it, we want to redo it, we just pull back on that yarn and the stitch comes right on out. So let's do that again. I've got my active loop on my fingers. I'm going to pull down on that. It got a little big on me here in all this stitching. I want to make sure it's a good 3-finger size there. And I'm going to stop and look at my chains before. This little one is my turning chain. I'm going to skip right over that one. I'm going to come to the next chain. Right now, we're just looking at these sort of the sunrise humps, if you will, of the chain right here. Not the one closest to our active chain, active loop. Skip that chain, find the next one. We want to go away from us and put our fingers right in that space, right into the middle of that chain there. Just like that. And we pull out and do that again. Got our active loop, the chain we're skipping, we're going into the next one. And we put our fingers right in the middle of that chain. And we see I'm pushing those back a little bit far on my fingers there to make a little bit of room because I don't have, a great big hook here, just my fingers. So we make a little bit of space. Then we yarn over with our yarn. Again, this is the end attached to our skein. Bring it up over our fingers. And then I just kind of grab it and pull it right back through just the chain. Now I want to pull that loop up so it's the same size as my active loop. So there's my active loop and there's the yarn over that I pulled through. So I push those back on my fingers a little bit, and to finish my single crochet, I'm going to yarn over one more time and then pull that loop through both of those loops. So now I am back down to one active loop and I have made one single crochet. Let's make some more. Again, I want to give that loop a little wiggle, get my 3 fingers in there, make sure it feels like it's the same size as my other ones, and then come right back down to my row of chains here. And it does help sometimes to have a little table or something you can lay it out on. Not required, but I find helpful. And you can see right here, we went into this one. There's a stitch worked into that chain. So we want to go to the next one. Look for that same loop on the next chain. We've got our active loop. We found the next chain. So we do the same thing. We just go right under that loop with our fingers. Give it a nice push back. And we can take our yarn over, pull that loop up and through the chain, and now get it to be the same size as the other loop on our hand. Push those back a little bit out of the way, and yarn over, and pull that loop through both of those loops to finish our stitch. And there is our second single crochet. And you can see from the top how we've got those nested V's, just like we made with our chains. This is a signature sort of fact of crochet stitches. They're all going to have this V on top. So let's make a few more. We adjust our hoop to the right size here on our fingers. You can see right there, we've got a stitch going in there. So we find the next chain, put our fingers right under that loop, yarn over, pull that yarn right up through the chain, get those loops to be the same size, make some room, yarn over, and pull that loop through these two loops. And you can use your other hand, however it works for you. I like to get very hands-on with both my hands when I'm doing this, but however it feels good for you. Just because I'm using one method to pull the loop through doesn't mean you need to. You can absolutely kind of use your hands in whatever position feels good for you. Let's do a few more here, and then we'll continue to build up our rows. We've got a stitch worked into this chain. So we find that very next chain right there. Like so. We're going to insert our fingers right in the middle of that chain. And again, if it's too tight to get 3 fingers in there, that's fine. Go on in there with 2. We just want to get some fingers in there so we can yarn over and pull our loop up through that chain. Get those 2 loops to be the same size. Yarn over again, and now pull that yarn through both of those loops. We've got, it looks like 3 more I can make on this row. So right now, we've got our foundation chain. We're making row 1 into the chain. We've worked into that chain right there. Look and find the next chain that's available. Put our fingers right into that chain. Yarn over and pull a loop up through that chain. Need to get a little bit more yarn from my skein. I've run through the yards I already pulled up. There we go. We've got 2 loops on our hand here, almost said hook on our hand. We yarn over again and pull that through both of those. Two more chains here. You can see there's, pull that out of the way a little bit here. Try and get out of the shadows. There we go. Here is a stitch worked into that chain. There's 2 more left, 1 and 2. So we can make 2 more stitches here in our first row. We go into the next chain, bring that yarn up and over the fingers, pull that loop through the chain, get those 2 loops to the same size, yarn over, and pull our yarn through both of those loops. Pull that loop, and this is now our active loop. Get our 3 fingers in there. We've got 1 chain left. So we're just going to go right on in there. A lot of times this very first chain is a little tighter, so it's very normal if you find that to be a little bit tighter than the others. Again, you can just get 2 fingers in there if that's what works. And then we can yarn over and pull up through the chain. And then yarn over and pull through. There we go. All right, so that It's a little bit of a close-up right now, but you can see that right there is what our first row of single crochet looks like. And this is what single crochet stitches look like from the front, from the side we've been working from. You can see there's 2 loops right here, sort of in the front of a stitch. And then on the top of a stitch, we've got the 2 loops for that V. If I turn it this way, it's a little bit easier to see how each one of those V's is just kind of nested into the one before until finally there's our active loop. So that is row 1. Now row 2 is going to start the same way, but now we're going to be working into row 1 rather than into that chain. So let's go ahead and start row 2. I want to get through it because we've got a lot more to cover here today. Again, this will go up on YouTube and you'll be able to go back and watch it on the Michael's YouTube channel. And I believe if you're watching it live, you'll be sent a link afterwards as well. So here is my active loop. I've worked all the way across for row 1. I want to make row 2. I need another turning chain, another little ladder or step to lift me up to the height for row 2. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that 3rd finger out. Remember, for this project, we want to use just 2 fingers for our turning chains. So with a 2-finger loop, then we can yarn over again and just pull that right through the loop. And now we've got our turning chain made right there. Of course, our project is all heading off this way. We need to flip it over. We just literally turn it like the page of a book. This will twist the loop on your fingers a little bit, and that's okay. We don't want to take it off our fingers. Just leave that loop on your fingers and just literally flip the whole project over as if it were the page of a book. So you can see right here is my tail end with my slip knot. It's now back on my right side. So now I have all these stitches that I can work back into to continue to grow the height of our project. So these single crochets do look a little bit different from behind, right? These always sort of remind me of, I think it's the Chinese character, possibly for house. I don't know why I know that. Weird little fact in my brain, but probably not even correct. But you see these 2 little strands right here, and then this loop. These are the parts of the back of the single crochet stitch. But on top, we still want to look for those top 2 loops. Now, instead of picking a random loop from the previous row to go into, it's really important that we make our stitches in row 2 and beyond working under the top 2 loops of the previous row stitches. So let's go ahead and pull this back over here and start on row 2. I've got my little turning chain, my ladder or step right there. I have the active loop on my hook, again with 3 fingers. And now I'm going to look for that very first stitch. We still want to skip the turning chain, but we want to look for the first single crochet of the previous row. Right there. If we pull open our fabric, you can see a little space opens up right there. And if I flip this over, you can see it's right under those top 2 loops. That space right there is exactly where we want to go with our fingers to make the first stitch for row 2. Active loop on my fingers. Just like when we were working to the chain, go away from ourselves. But now we're going under those top 2 loops at the stitch of the previous row there. So now push those down out of the way, yarn over, and now we're going to pull our yarn underneath the 2 loops of that stitch. But after that, it's exactly the same. We want to pull up on that loop a little bit to get it to be the same size as the other loop. Push those back out of the way a little bit, yarn over, and pull through 2 to finish the first single crochet of row 2. So you can see just how tall these stitches are. So after just 18 of these rows, you'll probably have a 36-inch long blanket. And all the rows from row 2 and after are exactly just what we're doing here. We have our turning chain, and then we single crochet in each stitch across. Let's do a couple more before we go over how to finish it up and add more yarn and how to figure out other sizes. I've got my loop here on my fingers, my active loop. We can see here, this is where our last stitch went in. So we want to come to the next stitch right here. We want to make sure we're going under those top 2 loops of that stitch. There's a nice big space right there. When we pull open on our fabric, you can see this yarn's pretty tough. Go ahead and give it a good tug there, and that space opens right on up. So now, make sure my loop's the right size there. I'm just going to go away from myself under those top 2 loops. yarn over, pull the loop up and through that stitch, get my loops to the same size, yarn over, and pull through 2. Let's do 2 more. Got my loop here on my hand. We look at our fabric. You can see that right there. Our last stitch is going in there. So we come to the next one. I just say it kind of looks like almost like a little cave. You can see it gets a little darker right there until we open it up. There's the space right there under those top 2 loops of our stitch. Then we can insert our hand right under there, right, our fingers, I should say, not the whole hand, unless you got a really big yarn. Yarn over, pull that loop up through the stitch. 2 loops on our hand, yarn over, and pull through. Now, the tops of these stitches, just like the first row, there's that V on top. So that's what I mean. We can keep going. We just make that little chain at the beginning of each row. And then as we come back along each row, we just want to make sure we go under the top 2 loops of each one of those stitches. The turning chain after the foundation chain, when we're just chaining across, all we do is we can just bring the rest of that chain over to work into it. So it's not as dramatic of a turn. We just we've been chaining one direction and we just sort of turn it around to start working back into those chains. But as we continue to work across in our rows, whenever you get to the end of a new row, you always want to make sure to turn it over like the page of a book. You always want to turn it the same direction, and that will make sure that your sides are really nice and even. So a few more things that I want to make sure to cover today before we do run out of time. Now, we talked a little bit about how if you want to make this in any size blanket, really anything bigger than just a small square, you're going to need multiple skeins. Now, this yarn is quite thick. Normally, when we go to weave in our ends, at the end of a project, we just sort of stick the strands underneath other strands until it's buried. This stuff is so thick that doesn't work very well. So I'm going to pretend that I'm all done with my blanket, or maybe I've run out of yarn. Let's pretend I've run out of yarn, actually. I'm going to say, oh, that was the end of that skein. Well, what I want to do is, if I'm adding a new skein, I want to make sure that I leave this loop open. This is my active loop. I want to be able to go back to it so I can keep crocheting. In that case, I'm going to take my new skein of yarn. We'll pretend this wasn't the same skein. This is a whole new skein of yarn here. And I'm going to sew these 2 ends together. Then I can continue to crochet with these as if it was just one very long strand. If I'm done with the project, then I want to secure that final active loop by pulling the cut end through that final active loop first, like so. With this yarn, it's so fuzzy, it might take just a little bit of tugging there, but now you can see it's nice and secure. So then we have these 2 ends to deal with, the tail end that we started with and our final end. I'm going to show you with the tail end because it's a little bit easier here to see. First thing you want to do is just use your fingers and start weaving it back into the fabric of the blanket a little bit. We just want to bring it back into our blanket a couple of stitches. So just sort of tuck it right into some of those other stitches. Then, when you feel like you've got a good place for it to hide, that is where we bring in the needle and thread. Got some coats thread here. You'll notice it's not an exact color match. It's not even that close. In person, they're actually quite a bit more different. You want to get as close as you can. This is actually not a bad choice. I wouldn't, for instance, pick a bright red thread for a white blanket, but otherwise, most of this thread is really going to disappear right into the yarn itself. You're not going to see the thread. So if you don't have an exact match, but you've got something close-ish, you're probably going to be fine. So let me pull this really close to the camera here so I can show you what we're going to do. I've still got a couple of inches here of my yarn, and I will trim that off later. But for now, I'm just going to hold that strand of yarn under the strand of yarn I want to hide it under, like so. Just pinch them right together. Then I'm going to take my needle. I've already threaded it. It's a double strand there, you can see, with a knot at the end. Actually, maybe you can't see. Very small. There we go. And now we just sew back and forth. Want to kind of aim for the center of the yarn. That's where it's got a core underneath all of this fuzz. But it's nothing fancy. We just go back and forth several times through both layers. And I don't know if you can see how well that thread just really doesn't want to focus for me tonight. The camera is being very picky, but it really does just disappear right into the fuzz of that yarn. So you just want to keep going through both layers back and forth several times until you get to the point where you can sort of tug on that end and know that it's not going anywhere. Once you've got it sewn down and you feel secure about it, you can go ahead and knot off your thread, probably with a couple knots, just make sure it's really nice and secure. And then, of course, we'll cut our thread and put that aside here so I don't lose that tiny little needle. There we go. And then you can just go ahead and trim that off close to, not on the sewing section, but real close to it, like so. And then your end will be nice and safely secured. So again, you want to do that with your ends when you're all done, or when it's time to add a new skein, you can do the exact same thing, just pinch them together and sew through both layers several times, and then you can just treat it as one long continuous strand of yarn. So let's talk about sizing. That chain of 17, oops, wrong thing. That chain of 17 was to make a blanket that is actually 16 stitches wide, because remember we skipped the first one, the last one rather, the last chain we made. And that gives us approximately 36 inches across. So these are some past math sheets from this class when I've taught it before. Let me pull up a clean one here. And let's talk about how to figure out how many stitches if we want to change the width of our blanket. And the same thing, how many rows? It's the exact same math. Real quick question to answer. Somebody said if you run out of yarn, you need to add another one. That's what I was just talking about. You just sew those two ends together and treat it as one long strand of yarn. But the bigger it is, the more yarn we're going to need. So this particular blanket that we've been demonstrating tonight is 16 stitches wide. Because remember, we chained 17, but the 17th was the turning chain. We only work into 16 of those stitches. And it was 36 inches wide. So let's say, for example, we wanted to make a blanket that was, and I don't know off the top of my head, exact dimensions for all the blankets, but I want to say an average width for a throw, for example, would be 50 inches. Okay. So how many stitches do we need to get 50 inches of width? Well, got to bring back old algebra from high school. This is cross multiplying. We're going to take 16 times 50 and then divide that by 36. So we take 16 times 50 and divide that total by 36. Now, I don't have a calculator on me. Unfortunately, my phone died shortly before class. But 16 times 50, we'll do some quick math over here. 3, 5, 800. 800, well, yeah, thank you. Somebody says 22.2 is the answer there. So we've got 800 divided by 36. Again, not going to try and do that in my head. 222.2 is the final result. So that would be 22.2 stitches. Now, we can't make 22.2 stitches. So that's where it's your project. You get to make a choice. You can make 22 stitches and have it just a little bit narrower, or make 23 stitches and make it just a little bit wider. It's totally up to you. But that's the mathematical formula we use to figure out how many stitches. It's the same thing for rows. We said 18 rows equals 36 inches. Let's say we wanted to make it 90 inches long. We want something for the guest bedroom. Well, again, I don't have a calculator on me, but we're going to take 18 times 90 across, and then whatever that total is, divide it by 36. And that will give us the number of rows. Ladina says 45 rows. Excellent. Thank you. So there you go. That would be, and if you came up with a decimal point, that would be the point where you get to decide, am I going to do an extra row and have it a little bit longer, or take off a row and have it just a little bit shorter? But that is the formula you use to figure out how much or how many stitches and rows you're going to need. Now, one more thing I can teach you is how to figure out how much yarn you're going to need. So let me pull up my sheet here. If we are making a 36-inch by 36-inch blanket, 36 inches wide, 36 inches tall, 36 times 36 is, somebody help me out. Somebody with a calculator. I thought I had it up here. 1,296. That means this blanket is 1,296 square inches. Is that right? 36 and 36? That seems high, but I believe you. Okay. We'll say 1,296 square inches. So we know we needed to make 1,296 square inches of blanket. Okay, that's right. Thanks. This is why I need you guys with a calculator. That's how many square inches of blankets we made. And we used 4 balls of yarn. Right balls there. So if we want to make, let's say, our ideal blanket size is 50 inches times 60 inches. That's going to be 3,000, I think. Yes, 3,000 square inches, right? All right. Then we plug it in down here. 3,000 square inches. This is the number we need. How many balls? So same thing. Now we're going this way. 3,000 times 4 is 12,000. But then we divide that by 1,296. Somebody says that's 9.25 balls of yarn. So this is where, unfortunately, we don't get to make a choice. Your choice is you can make a smaller blanket, but you're going to need to buy a whole ball of yarn. You can't just buy 9 1/4 balls of yarn. You'll have to buy all 10 balls of yarn to make that size of blanket. So again, I know that was a lot of information in a relatively short time. We've had a little bit of math, a little bit of sewing, definitely some hand crocheting here. But it really is a great introduction to crochet. Again, you will get the video tutorial. It will go up on the Michael's YouTube channel. So you can definitely go back and practice those chains. Those really are the biggest thing for everybody to get the hang of. I know they can look very wonky and twisted at first. Believe me, that is normal. The evenness of your stitches will come in time with lots more practice. So I don't know what happened. Let's see, are our Yarn Inspirations or Michael's people still here? I think they might have dropped it. Oh, okay. Here. Oh, good. I just didn't see your little square, so I got worried I was the only person left here in charge. Good. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining. We can go ahead and come back to the other camera then. I hope you guys do give this project a try. It is a lot of fun. Again, you want Bernat Blanket Big, sold at your local Michael's. It's a fantastic yarn for this. It's super squishy and it's easy care too. Machine washable and dryable. So unlike some of those other blankets you see out there, you know, that are sold finished, that have those big, beautiful stitches, but you can't wash them or use them, this is one that you'll be able to wash and use and love with your whole family. So I really hope you'll give it a try. And I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
All right. Have a great night, everybody.